Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Tommo, and welcome to my post-race Chinwag for the 2024 Dutch Grand Prix. We're not live, we're not at home either. I'm on a little weekend away, little Airbnb, but the content does not stop. I watched the race last night, didn't catch it live, but still watched it in full and want to reflect on how things panned out, okay? Because, wow, what a margin by the end. Verstappen-esque 22 point whatever it was seconds. Not something we're used to seeing from someone who is not Max Verstappen. Lando Norris, of course, won the race by a long way. It wasn't close in the end. No, he did. Oh, we'll get into that start, Lando. We'll get into that start. Let's start, of course, with a race rating. Typically, of course, this is live on YouTube, although don't forget, if you're Apple Podcast, Spotify, audio only, if you want to just listen to these post-race roundups, pre-race roundups, when news drops, blah, 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 don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, 5-star, all that good stuff. Okay, get that done now, because I don't have to remind you later. Right, race rating out of 10. Again, for me, 5 is not good, not bad, bang average. 10, greatest race of all time, one of the greatest races of all time. 1, absolute howler, no overtakes, no moves, no nothing. For me, look, honestly, obviously, yes, Lando is chasing Max, and that makes the idea of Lando winning more intriguing than Max winning by the same margin. In reality, let's be honest, right? Not only is Lando chasing, but also we're not used to Lando winning loads. This is only his second Grand Prix win ever, right? However, factually, looking at it, was it a banger? No. Was it a clanger? No. For me, it's a 5 out of 10. For me, this is prime example of, we didn't really have a balls-to-the-wall fight for the win. We had Lewis coming through and making some overtakes, which was kind of interesting. Pierre doing bits as well, giving us something to watch. But it's not one that will live long in the memory for the on-track skirmishes. Let's be honest. Okay, Zandvoort is a difficult place to overtake multiple cars. Oscar Piastri found himself struggling on pace relative to Lando because he was in traffic behind someone for most of the race, in part anyway. I do think Lando was the quicker driver on the day, no question, but also that kind of played into it. And yeah, overall, we had that 5-car skirmish down the pit straight, which was pretty vibey. And thanks to Kevin Magnussen having a terrible run into the final corner. Alex wasn't too happy about that. There were some moments, okay, but let's not overplay it. Let's not make it out to be more than it was, okay? It was a pretty bang average Grand Prix. You'd rate it more, of course, if you're a Lando Norris fan, maybe less if you're a Max Verstappen fan. Not that Max was still P2 at the end of the day, okay? Things didn't quite go to plan for Mr. Verstappen. However, if you want to win a championship, it's not about winning every single Grand Prix and picking up every single point possible. It's about being there consistently, even when you don't feel your cars, the equipment beneath you is giving you an ability to fight at the front. I mean, not only did Lando gap Max by, 22 seconds, he was only 2 seconds clear of Charles Leclerc by the end in a Ferrari that has really struggled as of late. And I think that speaks volumes to this not just being a step forward in McLaren, because McLaren did bring upgrades this weekend, but also Red Bull are having a tough time for it. Now, of course, the tinfoil hats will come out left, right and centre, be like, oh, is this them getting, punished for the brake stuff? And we will never know, okay? We will never know. I do take the FIA statement about the brake bias, not brake bias, brake differential thing. I take that at face value, okay? I do. But it does make you think what has caused not only... We know what's caused an increase in McLaren's performance, okay? McLaren bringing upgrades and doing a good job. But it does feel like more than ever, Max is really struggling with this RB20, which is not a, ground effect. Red Bull has been pretty tip-top to a point. And look, maybe this is just a knock-on effect of, they had their penalty on ATR for the budget cap overspend. They were the first to get to to nail it and get to the top, and then to continue to innovate, diminishing returns, and Newey thinking they should change concepts entirely, and they didn't. there's lots of factors that go into this, and it's impossible to pinpoint. I'm sure that even the team themselves can't pinpoint exactly why things have been not going so well as of late. But it was it was an interesting race. It was okay. I enjoy F1. So a 5 out of 10 race, I'm still happy. Okay. But for me, it was a 5, nothing more. So let's reflect on the race result then, shall we? Lando Norris wins with fastest lap as well, full 26 points for him. Max Verstappen P2, Charles Leclerc P3. Who saw that coming? Because he didn't. He was surprised. I'm not surprised he was surprised. He was right to be surprised, and he did a fantastic job to Charles. Oscar Piastri P4. You've got to think with Lando's gap up front, Oscar absolutely should be on the podium, and he'll be disappointed in himself that he didn't manage to get a move stuck on Charles Leclerc. Carlos Sainz P5, given, out in Q2, again, in a Ferrari that has struggled up to a point. But, Charles said this post-race, they need to understand why they struggle, a certain Grand Prix, but they also need to understand why things work so well here, okay? Because they weren't expecting this kind of performance, and all of a sudden they're there. I mean, they're quicker than the Mercedes, almost as quick as Verstappen with Charles at the wheel. Phenomenal Grand Prix from Ferrari after a Saturday that wasn't indicating much. Charles said he maximised his lap, and he was like, wasn't he like almost a second off of pole? And then in the race, their car comes alive. So, ground effect F1. This doesn't seem to be a one-off. This seems to be fairly indicative of where the regulations are right now. You can have big swings of performance race, Grand Prix to Grand Prix. Teams still struggling to understand these cars. I'm here for it. Don't get me wrong. I think the more unpredictability, the better the product is, if you ask me. Checo P6, George and Lewis P7 and P8, Pierre Gasly P9, great job from him. Fernando Alonso P10, rounds out your top 10. Then Hulkenberg, my days, this guy cannot stop finishing P11. And the points system will never give him his flowers for it. So annoying. Ricciardo P12, Stroll P13, Albon P14, Ocon 15, Sargent 16, Tsunoda 17, Magnussen 18, and then Bottas Joe, the Sauber. This was an absolute howler from Sauber by every stretch of the imagination. The only thing they didn't do was crash, which is more than can be said for Logan. But yes, not good for Sauber. Not good at all. So how does that affect the driver standings, you might think? Well, Max still has a gap. For once, the gap's actually come down because Max always seems to find a way to just eke out that gap even when he's not on his job. And this is another race where Max hasn't won, by the way. That's now 5 in a row, I want to say. 70 points now to Lando Norris. Exactly. Good maths, clean maths. Charles Leclerc consolidates P3, of course, in the championship, 192 points. His gap to Oscar is now 13. You got to think this feels like a bit of a one-off, but Ferrari do run well at Monza. That's their home Grand Prix, and they always seem to be inclined to bring upgrades that work around Monza. So I wouldn't be surprised if Ferrari have a good weekend next weekend. And Leclerc continues to have a gap to Piastri, but Oscar, I think, will gradually read him in as the season goes on. Sainz, 7 points behind Oscar. Hamilton, 18 behind Sainz. And Perez, 15 behind Hamilton. And then Russell, 17 behind Perez. So the gaps are the gaps. And Perez still P7 in the Mercedes sandwich. Given, you know what, I will say, given Max's struggles, I think Checo gave a, I don't want to use the word good because he still finished P6 and without Mercedes messing about with their strategy, probably could have quite easily been P8. But he was okay. He was okay, which is more than can be said for recent performances. Maybe I'm setting the bar too low. Perhaps I am. But it wasn't absolutely awful. And again, Monza, Singapore, Baku, 3 tracks where I expect Checo to deliver. It's just, I guess, kind of unfortunate for him that these tracks are kind of coinciding with a seeming dip in the performance of the Red Bull, as there is a light right shining in my eyes. So, well, with the power of editing, because this isn't live, that's better. Right. Pierre Gasly gained 2 points, of course, with his P9 finish, so he moves ahead of Ollie Behrman in the driver's standings. Otherwise, no movement. No movement going on outside of that. And then in the team standings, again, no position change, but McLaren closed that gap. 30 points now between them and Red Bull, 434 to 404. Alpine gained a couple of points, but again, they're kind of 14 points for Alpine to catch Haas between now and the end of the season. That requires Haas to score nil points, which of course Nico Hulkenberg always seems to find a way to get close. Feels like a bit of a stretch. I think that's a bit too much for Alpine to overcome. But hey, one crazy race could flip that on its head. That's what this point system allows. It means that you are rewarded more so for peaks in performance than you are consistency necessarily, without those peaks being as high as they could be. It's mad how Mercedes are 94 points behind Ferrari. You forget how slow Mercedes came out the blocks this year. I know they had a bad race in Zandvoort, but all in all, I mean, they won. One with Lewis in Spa, one with Lewis in Silverstone as well. Yeah, it's interesting how quickly these things can pivot and change. And it leaves more questions than answers, I think, about 2025. And that's why I can't wait till 2025. 2025 is going to cook. And make sure you're here on the Tommo YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss all of the content for the rest of this year and for 2025. Because I'm buzzing for it. I cannot wait. But also, I cannot wait to reflect on my predictions, which... we do these pre-race Chinwags and we predict, I ask for you lot for yours and you give me mine, you vote and blah, blah, blah. And thank you very much for doing that because it's good content, I think, a bit of interaction, okay? I'm here on my own and it's nice to try and kind of feel like there's another person on that side of the camera, right? So I do give my predictions, you give yours. And this weekend is one of those weekends where we all need to hang our heads in shame. We all need to seriously consider our life choices. I need to consider this as am I actually serious? Am I a serious human being? Are you real F1 fans? Because, well, we've both had a bit of a stinker here, starting with my predictions. Race winner Oscar Piastri, no. Wrong McLaren. Sorry, Tommo. Banger drive Alex Albon. Now, if Alex's flaw wasn't deemed illegal, which was, according to Pat Fry, some kind of setup issue, not a fundamental design issue, just a tiny setup issue, which almost makes it more frustrating. You've got to think, right, Williams didn't put this flaw through the whole design process and be like, oh, whoops, we added 1 centimetre too many to the, or whatever it was, all right? I imagined it was something like that, but that makes it does it make it more difficult to accept? Look, either way, he got disqualified from qualifying, from a great qualifying session, by the way, P8, less than a tenth from Charles Leclerc in qualifying. The man who went on to finish P3 on the podium. Now, again, qualifying pace and race pace, they're two different championships. But that was impressive from Albon with the upgrades, with reduced weight roll hoop, which would have helped out and given him a bit extra performance. So I need a drink. Thirsty. Stay hydrated. It was good to a point. Obviously, he got disqualified and then didn't really make too much of a recovery through the field. So it wasn't a banger drive from Alex, as much as I'd love to give it to him. But it was looking good after Saturday. It was looking good. Klanger drive Fernando Alonso. No, Fernando drove to P10, drove a perfectly good race. I think that Stroll was out the points. Fernando finished behind Pierre Gasly. He's still not great from Aston Martin. But could have been a lot worse. Banger team Williams, absolutely not. You've given Alex an illegal flaw. Shocker. They did, of course, rebuild Logan's car, which is a great job from the mechanics and the team working on his side of the garage. But again, in the race, there just wasn't much performance, wasn't much moving through the field, getting overtaken more than doing the overtaking, should I say. And then Klanger team Aston Martin already said, it wasn't great, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it could have been. I was going into this weekend thinking, right, Alpine, Williams, Racing Bulls could all finish ahead of the Astons, and not many of them did. So, fair play, Aston. Could have been worse. But then your predictions aren't much better, okay? Max race win, no. Only 15% of you voted for Lando Norris, to win the race, the man who did win the race. Banger drive, Oscar Piastri, 19% no. And even like Verstappen, 11%, no. Hamilton, 8%, no. Leclerc, 7%, definitely up there. But yeah, bit of a howler from you lot there, not even your top three. Clanger drive, Checo, no. Again, it wasn't, don't get me wrong, it wasn't a good, I'm reluctant to even say it's a good drive from Checo, but it was like okay, which is more than can be said for too many Grand Prix this year from Sergio Perez. So no, he's not Clanger for Checo. 11% Norris, no, definitely not Clanger. He won the race. 8% Stroll, no. P13. I mean, he was 3 places behind Fernando, even though he was running close to him for a good amount of the race. But you know, Lance isn't as good as Fernando. That's not really a statement worth making. So, yeah, all right from Stroll. 6% Ricciardo. No, actually, a pretty good recovery, considering they split the strategy across the Racing Bulls, and Ricciardo's worked better P12 in the end. Given he went out in Q1, a pretty good recovery drive from Ricciardo, but no points, of course, on offer. Clanger team Aston Martin, again, you're wrong as well. Sauber, 23%. Come on. The default Sauber take was the one this weekend more than any other, and neither of us made it. So, shocker there. 10% Red Bull. Yeah, kind of. 9% Ferrari, absolutely not. So, what about bangers and clangers then? Right? We did our predictions. We got them all wrong. But what do we think, actually? What's our ratings? Banger drive, clanger drive, banger team, clanger team from this weekend's Dutch Grand Prix. And again, I like to try and consider the whole weekend, of course. And you obviously put more weight on the race, okay? Credit is deserved for a good qualifying performance. But that's not going to outweigh a bad race performance, for example. So my banger drive, there's 3 names for me. It's Charles Leclerc, it's Pierre Gasly, or it's Lando Norris. And for me, I was actually serious. It was Gasly or Charles for me. Look, Lando did a fantastic job, hence why he's in the top 3 for banger drive, no question. I mean, his quali lap on Saturday was mint, tip top, very good. But he's carrying a car advantage. Yeah, for a long time, saying, people say only Max is winning because he's got, a massive, 25, 30 second gap by the end of these races. So he's clearly just got a car advantage. But Max is the one driving the car to that advantage. So you have to give credit to the pilot, especially when the teammate isn't able to do the same thing. And this weekend, it was Lando who drove the car to a 22 second gap and took fastest lap at the end. He did a great job. What could it have been if he didn't mess up the start? And I do think, on another day where Max isn't quite struggling as much with his Red Bull, that mess up at the start could have hurt Lando. So basically, this is my long way of saying I don't think he quite gets it for me. And then Pierre Charles, look, I've given it to Charles Leclerc. Okay, I've given it to Charles. Yes, both Ferraris were quick on Sunday. Carlos made really good progression. He didn't expect anything more than a P7, P8, got P5 in the end. But the way Charles Leclerc was able to not only hold off Oscar Piastri, but close within 2 seconds of Max Verstappen, drove, he called it himself a pretty faultless quali lap. I don't know what more he could have done. And given where that package has been, I think he extracted the absolute maximum. Now, of course, Pierre Gasly also did a fantastic job, and he was in amongst it a bit more. Towards the back, having to make moves on Albon, on Alonso. But I think, for me, Charles just about edges it over Pierre Gasly. I think I'd go Charles, Pierre, Lando, in kind of that order. That's my banger drive. But what about yours? Let's compare and contrast banger drivers. I'm going to alternate this time out, right? I'm going to alternate between the graphics, right? 1,793 of you voted. Let me know in the comments below if alternating between is more fun or not, okay? Because I'm all here for fun. And 43% of you went for Charles Leclerc. 36% Lando Norris, 11% Pierre Gasly, 3% Carlos Sainz. Yes, again, credit where credit is due to Carlos. He did a fantastic job given the struggles he had, because of course he missed out a lot of practice time with car problems, was able to come back, perform really well, and did bits in the race to get good points. But yeah, you've gone Charles, Lando, Gasly in that order. So slight difference between us. But yeah, look, there was some strong drives, especially from those three. There were some clanger drives. We'll get into that now. Let's do it. So, few candidates here. Zhou Guanyu, nowhere in qualifying, nowhere in the race. But then Bottas was also nowhere, particularly in the race. Qualifying, he still didn't get out of Q1, but it wasn't quite as bad as Zhou. That Sauber, oh my days. Like, Valtteri said it post-race that it really exposed their weaknesses, which, I mean, they're exposed most weekends, to be honest, but this really did, like, exceptionally so in Zandvoort. So yeah, Zhou had a howler, no question. He does have a really bad car underneath him, which always is like but then no one gave Latifi that benefit of the doubt when he was stinking. So, who else? I think George obviously qualified okay and then just moved backwards. Whether that's, his race pace, because obviously Lewis was starting from a much lower position and was able to recover somewhat, and they finished, within a position of each other. But yeah, it's hard to really say too much how much of that was just Mercedes messing up, or could and should have George done more, and would have Lewis done more from George's position. I'm inclined to think Lewis would have finished higher if he'd started where George did. But again, Lewis cocked up in qualifying. We'll get into that, by the way. I had some I had some fun on Twitter with that one regarding Lewis in qualifying. Look, for me, clanger driver, it's got to be Logan. It's to write off the car the way he did on Saturday. It's FP3, man. That's the one time you really don't write your car off. And it was a really strange accident, wasn't it? Because he just drove onto the grass. Like, it was obviously a mistake in hindsight, but it was like intent. He was intent on going on the grass and thought it would be okay. And then was like, well, hang on, mate, it's raining. And you're doing like 100 mile an hour on that bit, like on slick tyres. I'm not a racing driver, okay, as much as I would love to be. But that just feels like, not sure about that, Logan. So he absolutely wiped his car out, couldn't make qualifying at all, gave his team a huge job, a huge turnaround job. In the race, were there drivers who had worse races? Zhou, absolutely. He finished ahead of Yuki. Poor strategy on Racing Bull's side, but still finished ahead of Yuki, finished ahead of Kevin as well. And Valtteri, obviously. But that was just it was so bad on Saturday to have that incident that there are now genuine reports, not even rumours, reports that Williams are looking to take someone else on between now and the end of the season. And given everything that James Vowles has said, where, we've got an obligation to Logan to make sure that he can transition to another discipline and another field, that's mad. That is mad, right? Because I feel like with everything James Vowles has said, he's made his bed now. And he's made his Logan Sargent bed. And now he's got a lie in it. And to yoink him out for someone else when they know they've got Albon Sainz for next year, I understand the logic, okay, the premise that, Logan's crashing, causing damage, and he's not getting any points. And, Look, I think Liam Lawson would do a better job than Logan Sargent in that car. I do. I think that even when you compare their F2 careers, and they were quite similar, I think Lawson's more adept. He's shown that he can jump into a car that's more so competitive than the Williams. Maybe equivalent competitiveness where the Williams is now in terms of with this upgrade than where the AlphaTauri was when Liam Lawson jumped in. But that just seems a bit like if James is going to be so public with his support of the future of Logan, that would be quite muggy for him to yoink him out. But then again, they yoinked him out of his car and gave it to Alex. So would I be surprised? No. It would be tough. It would be a tough call. Is Lawson, Schumacher, and who else have I seen linked? I think it's mainly them two, isn't it? Sorry, Mick fans. Mick was a guy who had many a shunt. Okay, that is reality of his time at Haas. Okay, and yes, maybe I'm sure Günther played his part in not helping him and not helping facilitate the best version of Mick Schumacher. But the fact of the matter is, he was the one driving that car and he was the one shunting left, right, and centre. So that's exactly what Williams don't want. If they're going to bring someone in mid-season, Lawson would be the most sensible of those options. I mean, part of me is like, do they just, I don't know, find if they just want a steady pair of hands who get the car through the rest of the season, is a rookie who Liam Lawson would still be the right choice? I don't know. Let me know in the comments below. Suggestions. Who would be the safest pair of hands who's available right now? For some reason, Roman Grosjean just came to mind. I was like, safe pair of hands, Roman Grosjean. He knows how to have a little incident, doesn't he? Especially with a teammate. Him and Magnussen back in the day was absolute chaos. But yeah, who would be a good shout to chuck in the Williams between now and the end of the year? Almost like when they've got junior drivers, Williams, you've got Colapinto, who's been doing pretty good in F2. Is it even worth just seeing how he goes? Ready to just give him a test session to the end of the year? Look, it'd be harsh on Logan, but Williams got to play to their outs. And if there's an opportunity here, then I wouldn't begrudge them for taking it. But it would be very harsh on Logan, especially with everything that James has said. So me, Clanger driver, Logan Sargent. For you, Clanger driver, 27% of the vote. So a fairly big spread. Zhou Guanyu. Fair. I mean, he was, again, nowhere in qualifying, nowhere in the race. But he didn't absolutely write off his car with new upgrades, which is what Logan Sargent did. And to me, that is the biggest clang of them all, especially in FP3, so you can't even make qualifying. But I firmly get it with Joe. He's been nowhere, man. It's mad. It is actually mad. Maybe I need to do a recap on Zhou Guanyu and go through his F1 career to date, because I was so sure going into this year, and I was wrong, okay? We're all wrong at times, and I will put my hands up with this one. I was very much wrong. I was firmly expecting in this season, his third year in F1, to him to really consolidate his position and really be like, yes, I can be as quick as Valtteri. Because I feel like at many points during these first two seasons in F1, he has been able to match Valtteri. Now, maybe there's an inflated number in my head that I'm misremembering, and that's why I think maybe I need to do a video to recap. How bad has Joe actually been? That could be a good title, actually. Let me know. Any, again, thoughts in the comments down below. But yeah, this year it's just been so bad, and he's been really far behind Valtteri. Like, I feel like it's the furthest he's been behind Valtteri throughout their entire time as teammates, which is quite crazy in the third season. You'd expect a move forward, or at least a closing of the gap, but that has not been the case. So yeah, Zhou Guanyu, not good. 12% George Russell, again, he did move backwards. Do I think Lewis would have done more in that race? Probably, but there's no way of knowing. The Mercedes just wasn't on their job. Sonoda, 11%. Yeah, again, poor strategy, choice from Racing Bulls on his side, and he struggled. He suffered the consequences for that, even though he out-qualified Ricciardo, finished miles behind him. 11% Piastri. Again, when your teammate is winning by 22 seconds and you are not even on the podium, that's a bad look when Checo's done it time and time again. It's a bad look when Oscar's done it time and time again. There's been a lot of praise for Oscar from me, from you, but this was a disappointment from him. This was a trough. This was a bad, the optics in particular, right? Yes, of course, not running in clean air has an effect, blah, blah, blah. But the optics of this weekend were not in Oscar's favour, for sure. And he needs to work out what went wrong, why it went wrong, why he wasn't able to finish ahead of Charles Leclerc, because he should have. He had the package underneath him to do it. Right, okay, excellent. Next, banger team. For me, this is pretty easy. and it's Ferrari. Now, it's all relative, okay? Relative to where Ferrari have been, they surprised themselves. They brought performance. Obviously, Carlos did have car issues in practice, which were not on him. They were on the car. So there is a slight downgrade there. But the fact that Charles Leclerc was able to get a podium in that car and only finished 2 seconds behind P2 as well, I think Ferrari, it's not the weekend I wanted it to be. I said in the pre-race, if Charles Leclerc can come in, or Carlos, but the vibes of Charles Leclerc taking a pole and then like winning the race, that's what we need. We need 4 cars fighting at the front. Like, we've got 2 definitely in McLaren and Red Bull. Mercedes, they've had but I think they'll be back in Monza. I think they'll be good. But four teams, right? Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren, fighting for wins. Oh, I beg you, F1 gods, give it, please. 4's perfect. 4, that's the perfect number of teams that can actually win a race, I think. You have the midfield who can consistently get into the points, and it's really close between the other 6. But I think having a 4 at the top really allows a narrative, a story to build around those 4. But yeah, for me, banger team Ferrari. Of course, McLaren did a great job giving Lando the car that can win by 22 seconds, and Lando did a great job extracting that 22 seconds of performance. And for you lot, well, you agree. In fact, the whole vote was spread between just 2 teams, and you think that McLaren were banger team. 59% of the vote for them. 38% of the vote went to Ferrari, and basically no one voted for any other team. So I've only put them 2 in the graphic. Fairly easy, right? Fairly easy. 2 very clear and obvious banger teams this weekend. But what about Clanger? Look, the temptation to put Williams was high, very high. They let Alex down with the difficulty, with the illegal flaw, because it was outside the physical geometry boundaries that it needed to be. However, they did pull a worldie of a shift to basically replace Logan Sargent's car. So credit for that. They brought upgrades, and obviously in the race it didn't really pay dividends, unfortunately, but they gave Alex a car that he could qualify P8 in, so there's clearly performance there. So it's not as bad for Williams, all in all, for me, than it is for Sauber. I just sort it out. Like, no wonder Carlos didn't pick it. Like, of course not. What? How could he possibly have any belief and faith in this team? Like, yes, Audi are bringing a power unit for 2026, but the chassis, the actual chassis development, okay, the aero development, the engineering that's going to make this car perform or not perform is still Himwell. And that's not going to fundamentally change. Audi can't just bring loads of people in. Well, they can, I guess. And I guess they are, but they just can't bring loads of people in and just expect it to change overnight. It's going to take time, but the problem is this has been taking time for too long. Will Audi regret, because they have gone 100% into the team now. They were only going to own a 75% stake. They've gone 100%. There's been various murmurs from, when Andreas Seidl was in charge, that Audi, he wanted more support from Audi. He wanted Audi to go all in earlier. Will Audi regret not going all in earlier? Because this team, call it whatever you want, it is Audi. And they're not going to put their brand on it because they're at the back and they're trash. But if Sauber was sick, if Sauber were up in the top 4 fight, right? Sauber, say, replace McLaren. Audi are slapping that logo straight on it. But they're not. So they're not. And it's tough to see any positive from the situation. Nico Hülkenberg, good luck, mate. You're going to need it. I mean, he's a fantastic driver. So if anyone can extract performance from that car, it's Nico Hülkenberg. But yeah, tough. And 41% of you agree. Sauber is your Clanger team as well. 27%. Mercedes, not as good as it could have been. Not as bad as Sauber, but yeah. Clang fair. 18% Williams. 3% Racing Bulls. The Yuki Tsunoda fans out in force for that one. Right, cool. I think we're pretty much there. 35 minutes done. No edits, no cuts apart from the blinds. Thank you all for watching. Appreciate you all taking the time. And yeah, we will reconvene on when are we? Wednesday. I'm due Wednesday. My pre-race Chinwag for the Italian Grand Prix Monza. That is the next one, isn't it? I'm just assuming it is, but maybe it isn't. I'm pretty sure it is. And yeah, I need to work. I need to work on a video. Any thoughts and suggestions for this week's video? Actually, let me know in the comments below as well. Maybe it's the Joe video. How bad is Joe doing? Like, yeah, it's not good, is it? But yeah, anyway, thank you for watching. Like on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube, notification bell as well. Rate 5-star Apple Podcast, Spotify, all that. Support what I do. Thank you so much for supporting what I do already. Right, you already do plenty enough, and able to make this a career, which is barbaric. But there you go. My name's Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.